very good. Guten Abend! Schön, dass ihr alle da seid. Yeah, and you're obviously putting your trombone through quite a bit of effects processing, electric or electronic chain even. The first idea of a horn player amplifying themselves would be, maybe for most people, would be like a distortion and an amp. So usually people would probably have a mic placed in front of themselves and maybe the clean sound sent to the PA so they can be enhanced. So what made you come up with the idea in the first place of taking this different route?
Yes. The instrument is very monophonic, so that was a thing that I've been working around, trying to get more sounds into it. And with the piezo, you also get the movements. It's like really you both get the tone and the movements, and in that way it can feel like you're more people playing.
Okay. Yeah.
When I improvise, for me, electronics are always too slow.
Okay.
Because I want to be able to switch things in a microsecond.
Right.
But even playing solo, I like to try to expand the instrument itself and the possibilities. And once I have electronics, I start doing less and less on the saxophone, because one note is enough and I can play a whole week.
Yeah, if you have an infinite delay.
I need the physical aspect of playing and sometimes also suffering while playing, like being in a dead end. How do I get out there and what can I do? And
one thing that's been important for me in working with electronics is to try to retain the physical gestural aspect of relating to an acoustic instrument. So I've tried very hard to work with a laptop in that way. My amplification is pretty crude. I'm just using the mic on the computer. So in a way, there's some elements of what each person is speaking about. For me, it's always a new instrument.
Right.
And it's not so much about skill. It's a little bit out of my control. And I'm very interested in sort of that awkwardness and that edge for where it's a bit difficult and it might just come apart. That's really interesting for me, is like a place where creativity kind of opens up.
You have guitar and the banjo, and it's obviously both stringed instruments. So when you play these two, is it kind of like a duality for you? Okay, you're gonna do this with this instrument, this with that instrument, or is it like something, it's just two sides of the same thing?
Every time it's different. Sometimes play a couple of minutes on one instrument and then switch to the other, and then it's like almost like a conversation between those two.
Bass, and the double bass is maybe one of the acoustic instruments that has one of the worst input-output ratios. It is a lot of hard work to get something out of it, I would say. Very physical. I do enjoy that, and I do that quite a lot of my time. However, in the solo work with the double bass, I always struggle with these things. I want to be, like you described, I want to be several persons. And also I want to not just have a one-to-one input-output situation, but I want to create processes that I can ignite and carefully influence. So it is a bit away from the idea of controlling an instrument rather than creating situations or environments. And since I'm also have a strong lean towards sound system music, experimental and other, I wanted to create a kind of a more immersive bass sound with this project. In a lot of instances, I do very, very small things on the instrument that have great consequences. However, it is strictly related. So there is the sound is processed in, I guess, in a lot of traditional ways, as with filters, distortion, reverb, and so on, and some loops. But there's always, the source is always the action on the instruments. But the action is supposed to really put me in a state where very minute gestures are allowed to have great consequences and create a lot of sound, I guess.
Talking about what we did in the lockdown, I think I noticed a lot of people released records of music that they recorded 20 years ago. everybody was
Okay,
going back
right.
through their
Yeah.
archive.
Because now they had the time to.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but that's materials too. This is materials, and one of the things that I did also during the lockdown is very much related to material, was I started making these etudes for Zoom. Small objects, small gestures. So
Okay.
just really trying to understand what are my gestures as material even,
Okay.
so in relation to these objects. And just making videos from here to, here to here,
Right.
working with objects and, and really thinking about, well, what is this, how do I touch it, how do I get a sound? Is it a big sound, is it a small sound? Really kind of taking it apart because I had time.
Yeah, Ido, I was wondering, being from Israel, I think you were born and raised there, and then
Yeah.
came to Berlin at some point?
Yeah, 5 years ago.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was wondering if you would say that there is a certain cultural heritage you carried over from Israel that reflects in the music that you're doing.
Absolutely.
No.
In Israel, it's the improvised music scene is really small. It's maybe 20 or 30 musicians. But there is other music, folk music. This is the stuff I'm listening to all day. I'm thinking in the language of the Hebrew man, and I'm dreaming and hearing those sounds. And so of course it's inside what I'm doing.
Ich glaube, es ist interessant, Solo-Impro, da gibt es sehr unterschiedliche Approaches, das werden wir heute hören. Es geht eigentlich um Beziehungen am Ende auch da. Das heißt, Beziehung zu Material, und ich finde es interessant, das Phänomen der Bezogenheit immer deutlich zu machen oder auch zu spüren, dass man auf etwas bezogen ist. Das können andere Mitspieler sein, sind es auch oft. Es kann aber auch ein Klang oder ein Material sein, und das Augenmerk zu legen auf die Qualität der Beziehung und nicht nur auf Beziehungen mit was.
Because having come a long way playing solo improv, could you describe how your playing has changed or evolved over the years?
During time, I mean, after the 10 years, so the difference between, let's say, the first record and the second one is, in the beginning I had some limitations, so there were pieces where I just basically used some material, so in order to hold some other stuff back. Later on, after 10 years, I was able to just say, okay, I start and I use it, but I play maybe 20-minute long or 30-minute long pieces, so like journeys through all the thing, while it was in the beginning maybe more almost like etudes.
Okay.
Little improvised.
So you're getting more fluent and more
Yeah, now I just,
sophisticated
I mean,
and everything.
especially now, I don't know what I will do in
Great.
3 minutes.
We're gonna find out. That's a great leading into the actual performances thing. So it was really very interesting talk.